Hi friends, welcome to the Take Part podcast, where we talk about reaching out and joining in to better your life, experience deeper connection, and achieve your goals. I'm your host, Emily. Thanks so much for being here. This is going to be another one of my sort of rambly, nerd out episodes. I really love doing research and kind of digging into why joining in and participating in our society is beneficial to us. And today will be in that vein. So we'll go through essentially 3 topics. One of them is making sense of the world. One of them is healing trauma. And one of them is getting our basic and advanced needs met. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the contradictions that exist in participating, and it's not all flower and roses. Like, there are some things that we have to pay attention to, so we'll dig into that as well. To set the stage, most of this comes from the world of social psychology. Psychology is much more on the individual level. We can then look at things from a societal level, which is the sociology kind of discipline. And that's more about how groups, institutions, and societal structures are impacted and shaped at the macro level. And social psychology is, again, how we are impacted by our interactions with others. There's lots of interplay between these 3 disciplines, right? And we'll talk about some of that, but it's just important to know the distinctions as we go through this. So where we're going to start is at a really basic level, which is actually one of my favorite topics, and I think something that I really like to talk about with others and understand how people think about it, which is, how do we as humans make sense of the world? As humans, we have to, over the course of our lifetimes, we learn more things about the world, and we have to compartmentalize and put them into categories in our brains. That includes information and realities that are actually quite terrifying. So as an example, when we're kids, at some point, we learn that we're going to die someday, or that animals die, or that our relatives die, or whatever that is. And we have to start making sense of that and putting it into a context that allows us to not just live every moment of our lives terrified of dying. Now, let's be real, many of us still struggle with this, and a lot of our anxieties and fears and things that we struggle with every day actually do go back to just a simple fear of dying, and that's understandable because it's something that's really hard for us to make sense of and to grasp and understand what that means and try to live a good life while knowing that it's going to end. So a lot of the challenges that we all face actually come back to this sort of elemental fear of dying. But as we become adults and as we learn more things, we each develop a set of strategies and a set of beliefs that help us cope with that particular knowledge. For some people, it's religion. For other people, it's just a set of worldviews. It might be a definition of morality. It might be a definition of a good life. It can be all kinds of things. But those set of beliefs that we develop throughout our lifetimes also include how to behave, how to treat others, and what the purpose of our lives are generally. So this making sense of the world isn't just about mortality, but it's about all of these different things that help us to define what a good life is. For a long time throughout history, these questions were answered for us, whether that be through strict religious doctrine, through superstition, through various other sort of rigid, uncompromising structures within our societies. And it's a fairly modern thing that we have very few of these structures in our society that really help us orient or are super rigid. Of course, some people have very strong faiths, they have very strong affiliations, and these things will help you to make sense of the world. But without those kind of very ingrained, homogenous societal structures, a lot of that is left up to us to figure out. So this is where we get to something that I personally believe, and one philosophy or one way of thinking about this, which is that I believe we largely make sense of the world through others, through our interactions with other people. There are disciplines associated with this, right? So there's something called social constructionism, which is essentially the idea that reality and knowledge are shaped by our social interactions rather than being inherent. This social constructionism is at a societal level. So our collective knowledge and reality is shaped by these interactions with others. We operate with a lot of what we call social constructions that have been ingrained in us for a really long time. There are some very large examples, like how money works, how our political system works. And then there's some what we think of at this point as implicit things that we just know how they work. For example, green on the stoplight means go. We just know how these work because they were constructed by humans at some point in interactions between humans, and then they become just how we operate through more and more people adopting that way. Now, as a side note, this is actually a special passion of mine, social constructionism, and I plan to do a lot more content on this later. But for now, we'll just do some basics. So there's another very similar term, social constructivism, which essentially is the same phenomenon, but on an individual level. So based on what we were just talking about, you are constructing your reality, your knowledge, and everything that you believe and think about the world through your interactions with other people. And I do believe that this plays a very big role in how we perceive reality. And what's so interesting about this, so it's essentially that what's considered real or true to us is constructed by a series of complex and often really invisible interactions with other people. This can be individual interactions, one-on-ones. This can be interactions with institutions. And these days, that can also be interaction with other people through technology, which in my estimation is still social interaction in this context. Of course, technology does bring a whole other new element to this equation, right? Socially constructed norms in our current society are often created online. And I don't believe that we yet understand fully the implications of that. And the platforms in which we interact is in some ways distorting our collective knowledge and identity by integrating all kinds of things that aren't true, integrating all kinds of conspiracy theories, whatever it might be. And we have the element of powerful, rich people trying to shape our collective knowledge and our collective understanding of the world so that they can make more money or maintain their control. We could argue that there's been some element of this for centuries, but I think this is a different thing with the technology side of it integrated. So I believe all of us have had trouble making sense of the world at some point in our lives, right? Maybe we're adults and we're still having trouble making sense of our lives. I think that's a very common experience. Or maybe you're just not sure about a certain issue. So again, we could rely on institutions for that. We could go to our religion, we could go to people in power, we could go to the media, these kinds of things. Or we can shape it on our own through creating interactions and dialogue with people that we trust and people that we feel understand and appreciate our best interests. Of course, let's acknowledge that some of this is in our control. And some of it is just so pervasive in our society that we don't even really notice that we're getting ingrained with some particular understanding of the world. And there are still a lot of people who go through their entire lives without ever really questioning where they've gotten their beliefs from, where they've gotten their understanding of the world from. Whether that's just their family has told them they've been ingrained in a particular type of society for a long time, or they went to a certain type of school, that sort of thing. So I believe in this vein of if we do believe that ideas and knowledge and our understanding of the world are shaped through social construction, then it's important to reach out and participate and to broaden our exposure to different ideas and to eventually shape our own worldview and which constructs we're going to buy into voluntarily. If we don't do this and we're not proactive with it, we are just a product of a system that just wants to sell us things and never really has any other motivations in our best interest. And so it's important to proactively get out into the world and seek out different perspectives so that we know which ones will resonate. Moving on to the second topic that I promised we would talk about, which is participation in the world can help us heal trauma. So let me be crystal clear on this. I am not a therapist. I will not go into any semblance of how to in this section. I am a huge advocate for therapy for basically anyone who has access to it. And I've been lucky enough to have a really exceptional therapist for about 6 years who has helped me in ways I can't even explain. One of the ways that she has framed this for me is that people like me have a tendency to intellectualize our problems, right? That's probably a shocker for those of you who know me and for seeing me nerd out on YouTube about various things. I tend to intellectualize my problems. What this means is that I identify a problem for myself and I just start thinking about it really hard. I say, why is this happening? What does it mean? What can I do about it? I really need to just figure out and problem solve what's happening in my own brain, and then maybe I can take some action. And I might come up with what I think is a brilliant solution, and I might go out and implement it. But more often than not, I cannot come to a solution because it's actually just something that can't be solved by the brain alone. What I've learned over time is that the fundamental level of any challenges that I have or damage that I have taken on throughout my life is at the level of my nervous system, and it has to do with other people, right? It has to do with an interaction or series of actions that I've had with someone at some point that taught me how to behave in this way and really taught my nervous system how to behave. So healing to me is being able to comfortably be in situations that previously terrified you, safe situations, let me be clear on that. There is a process that requires you to seek out those uncomfortable interactions or seek out situations that you would maybe have previously been terrified and have corrective experiences that show you that those normal, safe environments are actually not as terrifying as your nervous system has learned that they are. So my tendency to intellectualize is actually not helping me. What I really needed to do was go out and have more interactions with people and go out and challenge my perception of things being challenging. Of course, this is not easy work. I don't mean to trivialize it. And of course, there is a huge spectrum of what people might call trauma. So just keep that in mind. But it's been extremely powerful for me personally to recognize that healing must be done in relationship with others. Okay, so third topic is how participation helps us meet our needs, right? These topics are all intertwined. There's a really interesting term in social psychology called entitativity. It's a terrible word. I love what it means, but I hate saying it. Entitativity. It's like entity. So it basically represents how much a group is meaningful or coherent, as opposed to just a random collection of people. So, like many things, there is a scale of entitativity. People who are in line at the grocery store, for example, they are a part of a group, they're doing the same thing, but they have no meaningful connection to each other. Then a scale up from that, a recently formed team or a loosely associated social group has some, and then a family or a long-time group or team has a lot. So I'm just going to refer to this as a super close-knit group, mostly so I don't have to use that word. And there are a number of ways that you can build that close-knitness in ways that benefits you. You can learn to share more openly. You can understand each other's motivations and personal feelings about things. You can work hard on things together, have a really hard common task, etc. And it's shown that groups with really intimate relational styles, for example, if there's a social group that share things communally and really live in partnership with each other, that those groups are very high on this scale. So for sake of argument, we are striving for groups that are close-knit like this. There are a lot of different ways that these fulfill our needs. On a basic needs level, close friendships fulfill a basic need for us to be connected, for us to feel that close connection and belonging. Groups that have a common task or purpose or are working towards something together can help us meet our common need of personal achievement. And then groups that are affinity or identity-based help us meet a basic need of feeling belonging or reinforcing and maintaining our identities. So connecting this to what we talked about at the beginning with making sense of the world, particularly when it comes to something like mortality, close-knit groups like this actually help us to stave off the sort of existential anxiety and dread. When we feel a part of something or feel a sense of belonging, we have a sort of psychological shield from too much worry and too much stress about mortality. And if we are feeling just in certain moments really unclear or really lost, these deeply connected groups can offer us a place to reflect on that feeling, provide a safe place for us to voice concerns or challenges, get advice, hear stories, and get reflections from a trusted group of other individuals. This is probably the most compelling thing to me, which is that these groups not only help us to meet some basic needs like belonging and connection and things that we know we need as humans, but they also promote our overall well-being and mental health by helping us to work through things like identity, sense-making of the world, and fear of mortality. So all of that sounds lovely, I think, I hope. I do want to spend just a second on some of the sort of contradictions that exist within participating in groups in this kind of close-knit way. You may have heard some of the research or understand that groups are shown to produce some level of conformity. So to dig into that a little bit, every group quickly develops norms, ways in which they interact and have a sense of kind of order and understanding within their group. In workplaces, I always encourage any group or team to be very intentional and proactive about these norms, right? Gather together, actively define what you want those norms to be, and hold each other accountable to those. So these can be things like, do we want to communicate via email or via text? Do we talk to each other informally, or is there a sort of respectful tone to our communication? Do we move fast or do we take our time? All of these are different sorts of norms, and there are lots and lots of different norms. So teams have to decide what's important to them and which things they want to define proactively. Outside of work, these norms are almost always implicit. In other words, they create themselves through interactions that happen over time. So when you join a social group, for example, you might behave slightly differently in a group that's very boisterous and friendly than in a group that is really focused on playing chess or something like that. The norms that are established in those groups are not necessarily spoken about. They're not saying, oh, we should behave in this particular way or we should communicate in this particular way, but through the ways that each individual person engages in that group, those norms are just shaped on their own. There are positives to this sort of conformity element, right? It can encourage kindness. It can encourage other behaviors that foster connection and harmony and inclusiveness. And in a strange way, the threat of being ostracized from a group can be positive in maintaining a sense of harmony in a group or order, depending on the purpose of that group. But then obviously there's the other side of things. If we are a part of a group, we can lose ourselves to a strong set of norms that's already been established or that's established over time based on a really strong personality, for example, or multiple strong personalities. So we can then behave inauthentically, we can feel othered, we can feel like an outsider. In extreme cases, it can also cause us to have really bad judgment and do things that we normally wouldn't do that harm us if we're inclined to follow a group that is doing dumb things and just takes us along with them. In the same way, a group can intensify our opinions and attitudes. So if you're in a close-knit group and you hold similar opinions to that group, it's shown that our conviction to those beliefs is stronger in a group like that. And again, that can be a positive, but it can also be really bad if those convictions are hateful or violent or otherwise damaging to us or to society. I felt that it was important to outline some of those contradictions or some of those challenges that can happen with groups, because I don't want to make it sound like participating in a group is automatically better for your health and better for society if you're not aware of some of the nefarious things that can come up with that sense of conformity. Bringing these themes together that we've talked about, making sense of the world, healing yourself, getting your needs met, and some of the contradictions that we talked about, my point in bringing these things together is that participation in the world with intention is really valuable, and the intention piece is critical. We've already talked about this a little bit in the podcast, but sometimes you find yourself participating in something that in the end just doesn't feel like you. Maybe you think that some certain group or certain event sounds amazing and you go and you find yourself not feeling very included, or the topic wasn't as interesting as you thought it would be. Similarly, maybe you've been a part of something for a really long time and you feel very close-knit with these people, but you feel yourself and your values and interests changing and shifting, so you decide to leave. There's no right way to do this, but I think the evidence of the benefit of trying is really clear. And if we're able to be intentional about where we want to be, and that includes where we want to start, if we are able to continue with that thing, or if we just want to try something else, and if we're able to pivot after long periods of time in a particular group, I think that kind of intention and self-awareness and being able to evaluate the situation that you're in is incredibly powerful and is a key element to the value of participation. So with that, please do let me know in the comments what kinds of participation have helped you make sense of the world. And have you encountered any contradictions or challenges in the groups that you've been a part of that maybe I didn't cover? And as I always say, I am sure I missed some nuance and some things in here, so please always feel free to let me know what you would add to this conversation. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.